Palantir locks down new record highs, market cap wise at least, and the deals keep adding up for Palantir with a bunch of news adding up over the week. So, talking about the stock first, massive support came in breaking into the $32 range for the stock, and this was just on Friday. Prices we haven't seen in years on a per share basis for Palantir, and as alluded to in the intro, technically Palantir is the most valuable it has ever been as a public company after their DPO, even though the per share price is still well below all time highs. Now, mechanically, this is just due to the share float being much larger today, but regardless, just a fun fact for those wanting to understand people saying Palantir is at all-time highs, but it's also a good real-world demonstration on what dilution can do to a company and how it adds up too. Now, we got plenty of SEC filings first to go over this week, and we do get some interesting insights, even if there is some insider selling going on, which I'll give my raw thoughts on. But for the filings really quick, first we've got several transactions over the week for Rubicon sales, continuing to offload these minuscule dollar amounts of this penny stock. Now, dollar-wise, this really doesn't mean much to the company. It just looks like Palantir is really just trying to sell off what they can over time. Now, the insider selling started with Ryan Taylor, who offloaded 250,000 shares, and this is after utilizing some of his options to acquire 160,000 shares. Now, not surprisingly, with Friday after market, we actually did get another sell transaction from him for 160,000 shares, which looks like to be from those exercise options. Then we got David Glazer, who similarly with a couple transactions got 180,000 shares and offloaded them into the $31 range, with also Heather Planishek for 20,000 shares respectively. Now, do I think these are consequential or major sells in my personal opinion? Not at all. This is business as usual, and these are small transactions in comparison to the overall float. And then also just based off other earnings that we've seen in the past, it doesn't seem like the slew of selling has even started. And the positioning of these insiders, they're taking advantage of the price action right now. Now, if we see a large sell though from Carp or Teal, that's probably a different story and will definitely garner much more attention. But it's really just info to do as you please with right now, and some can have a totally different view where I'm kind of nonchalant about it, but some may really not like it at all. Then we get a new deal announcement from, in my personal opinion, a slightly problematic customer. Now, remember, this is my own views here, but Surf Air Mobility, or the penny stock ticker SRFM, released a press release essentially saying they are setting up Surf Air Technologies to be kind of the customer and main utilizer of the platform developed alongside Palantir with their parent company. Now, this is pretty common for penny stocks announcing something like this, and initially the market actually hated the news, dropping like 30%, and I got a screenshot of that in the pre-market. But then during the day and throughout the week, it actually traded way higher, at least initially on the day, being up over 20-30%. Now, remember, this high volatility though can be pushed by the small market cap and float of these kind of companies, and really from a Palantir perspective, this was a nothing burger, but it's just a pattern I've kept seeing from SRFM, who releases a press release once in a while with Palantir's name on it, with nothing really in it and substantial, and then the price goes up and then back down, just as we've seen here again for the week. Now, what's the potential upside for Palantir? Well, keeps up the work maybe on new and emerging problems in R&D. So essentially that's what it is, where if it succeeds, Palantir can actually bear fruits from this labor. But if it goes bust, it really won't make a difference to them since Palantir doesn't really need this business here. But it's still something where they have an opportunity to discover something new and, get in the ground floor of something that's developing. Then we get a quick shout out from Pacific Defense, who's announcing their US Army CMFF program team. Essentially, Palantir is a part of the list of hardware and software partners working together to compete for the program that they're trying to run for. Where, for reference, Pacific Defense has put in more than $100 million so far, investing into the MOSA product base. So for scale, these kinds of projects add up actually, where even if Palantir isn't, say, the prime, like the Titan program, well, they can still participate and benefit where they're helping on the software side of these projects, and hopefully it'll expand over time. Then Palantir also expands their merch offerings, so we get way more than the hatch during the initial launch, and even ensure the label of the items that are made in America. So it's just a brief shout out here since I think the new stuff is cool, and really my personal thoughts on Palantir launching this is a cool way to engage the retail investor base. Not necessary though, I'd say, because it has been an ask at least more widely on X for people who want to rock Palantir gear. Now everyone's got their own taste on rocking even company gear as an employee, let alone someone who is just an investor, but I'll leave that up to you, and this can be checked out on store.palantir.com. And then in a bit as well, we got unexpected news. Palantir showed up on an article surrounding the mishaps of Google and the Google Pixel phone with scary vulnerabilities. Essentially, Palantir, alongside a couple other parties, investigated and concluded that there was a major vulnerability on the software package where the consequences of getting surveilled on or remotely controlled on through these users' Google Pixel phones. Now, the big thing was that this has been around since 2017, apparently, because it has a hidden Android software package called Showcase.apk. Now, for Palantir, Google did not move quick enough to handle this issue and really had to do what's best for themselves, and internally, they banned Android at the company. Now, if this will be a persistent issue and long-standing position, we'll see, but I think from a Palantir investor perspective, this is a good demonstration and shows their seriousness that Palantir has when it comes to this kind of stuff, especially if you think about the kind of crucial roles they play for their customers, not only commercially, but government-wise too. Then we get another surprising silent media move from Palantir. Peter Thiel actually had a guest appearance on the Joe Rogan Show podcast, and really, it's one of the biggest stages in the world in the media. Now, the focus of the conversation is with Peter Thiel, who is a Palantir co-founder, but also famous for other business ventures, being a billionaire. You got PayPal and Facebook investments, so it's not like they just talked about Palantir. But I think what was kind of cool is that in the video description, they actually included a link to Palantir's website. Now, they didn't have to do that, but the value is just getting some eyeballs over Palantir's website, and really it only takes one crucial person to come across that can possibly lead to a bootcamp participation or eventually a contract, which typically is on the higher end of the price range for Palantir for those kind of customers. But that's the thing here, some folks think it's not the right target audience or whatever, but considering the low cost of this and basically probably being free for Palantir, at least on the corporate side, and if it's the wrong customer profiles, they wouldn't pursue it further anyways. So in my opinion, it doesn't hurt to just have more opportunities here when you cast a wide net. And I think Palantir needs to, at the moment, just keep on getting customers where they come in from different avenues. With more exposure, the better, since the stickiness and performance of the product doesn't seem to be an issue and they can prove themselves then. So even if it's a small amount of people, if you have a cast a wide net, like I mentioned, at least someone might come through the door. Now, with earnings being digested at this point, I would say I also touched on this week, a couple catalysts potentially coming up with seeing how institutional ownership, at least what has been disclosed by with the 13F, seems to not have moved much. But it's important to note too, this is a delayed metric based on the end of the quarter's holdings, which is more than a month ago at this point. So with earnings being released just this month, we may not actually be seeing the full influx of institutional ownership and buying. Now, speculation-wise, of course, some are thinking and saying this recent price action upwards into now the $32 range is just being driven by retail excitement. But for me, it's not too far from the imagination that institutions are at least dipping their toes in alongside this retail excitement, who do have gunpowder to help fuel what seems like a pretty quick rise to where we are today. Now, the other big kind of unclear factor is S&P inclusion, which will have another round and seeing if Palantir will make the cut in early September. The actual rebalance date, of course, is on September 20th, later in the month, but the real catalyst is when the market finds out the additions and the subtractions from the index at the beginning, like mentioned. So it'll be interesting to see as more time goes on too, and if Palantir misses from getting added again, if this will continue to be pent-up demand or just build up for institutions. And this is amongst the slew of analyst price targets too increasing right after earnings. So it really feels like Palantir is building up all this momentum to fuel maybe not even the stock price wise, but just overall reputational currency for the company and being recognized from institutions at least as a true contender to become a big tech company. Now, as I warned earlier though in the video, my personal opinion is that with a rich valuation, there are still execution risks, meaning any change in the expectations of their performance can knock them down a ton because of the multiples that are based on them growing into their worth. But others would argue the opportunity still really is in the volatility, so I'll leave it up to you and if Palantir is even the kind of company that's suitable for you to be invested in, considering your risk profile, stage of life, and all these other things where your money can be allocated to. It might just be an interesting company to follow, honestly. But what are your thoughts though below, and I'll see you in the next video.